When my mother died, I didn't cry. I was 22 years old, newly married, and already deeply spiritual. And I thought I understood death. But years later, I realized something that completely changed the way I understand grief. I hadn't actually grieved my mother. I had understood my grief intellectually, but I hadn't allowed my heart to feel it. And if you have been carrying a loss for years, I want you to stay with me because this isn't a video about telling you to let go. It's about something much more compassionate. So I was just 22 years old when my mother passed away. I was newly married and I was already very interested in spirituality. I had started reading spiritual books. I was thinking deeply about life, death, the soul, the consciousness. So when my mother died, my mind immediately had an explanation. I told myself, we come here for a while and one day we all leave. And intellectually, that made sense to me. So I thought I was okay. In fact, other people thought I was incredibly mature. They would look at me and say things like, she's so young, but she has understood life. And I think I started identifying with that version of myself, the spiritual one, the mature one, the one who understands death. But when I saw my mother's dead body, and I burst out crying, and for that moment, something completely different came through. It wasn't philosophy. It wasn't spirituality. It was simply my heart. Then, very quickly, I put the mature version of myself back on. I went back to understanding. I went back to spirituality. I even started reading the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, and thinking that I'm living that. People appreciated how strong and wise I was. But today, when I look back at that young woman, I have so much compassion for her because she didn't know how to grieve. She knew how to understand grief. She didn't know how to feel it. It took me many years of my own healing and transformation journey to understand this. Sometimes we can use even beautiful things: spirituality, knowledge, positive thinking, wisdom, even our desire to be strong, to protect ourselves from something that hurts too much. And I'm not saying spirituality is wrong. I'm saying that sometimes the mind reaches an understanding before the heart has had a chance to process what happened. And there can be a difference between I understand why this happened and I have allowed myself to feel what this has meant to me. And that distinction changed something for me. And perhaps you are watching this because you have lost someone. Maybe it was recently. Maybe it was 10 years old. Maybe it was 20 years ago. Maybe it was your mother. Maybe your father. Maybe your husband. Maybe your child. Maybe your closest friend. Or maybe it wasn't a person at all. Maybe it was a relationship, a marriage, a career, your health, a dream, a version of your life you thought you were going to live. Loss can take many forms, and I don't want to sit here and tell you that there is a particular amount of time after which you should be over it. Honestly, there isn't. So if you have been grieving for years, I'm not here to tell you why haven't you let go. I'm not here to tell you You need to move on, and I'm certainly not here to tell you to stop loving the person you have lost. Love doesn't need to disappear for you to experience moments of peace again. Where there is deep grief, there has been deep love. Just let that sink in for a moment. Your grief doesn't mean you are weak. It doesn't mean you're doing healing badly. It tells us that something mattered deeply to you. And perhaps the question isn't, how do I stop grieving? Perhaps a gentler question is, how can I honor the love without continuing to abandon myself in the suffering? Because those are not the same thing. We can honor the love. We can remember. We can miss someone, and gradually and slowly make room for moments of gratitude, love, and even joy again. This isn't betrayal. That is life continuing. And there is another layer that often makes grief so complicated. Regret. I should have caught. I should have said I loved them. I should have behaved differently. I shouldn't have said that. If only I had done this. If only I had noticed. If only I had been there. Sometimes we don't just grieve we grieve the things we wish we could go back and change. And that is where forgiveness becomes part of healing. Not pretending it didn't happen. Not saying what happened was okay. But beginning to have compassion for the person you were at that time. Because you were living that moment with the awareness you had then. You cannot go back and become today's version of yourself in yesterday's moment. So what does healing mean to me today? It doesn't mean I'm done grieving. It doesn't mean I don't miss my mother anymore. It doesn't mean I have completely figured life out. It means I can hold my memories with more tenderness. I can acknowledge what hurt. I can acknowledge what I wish had been different. I can acknowledge and allow the emotions to exist. And I can also allow myself to live, to laugh, to love, to experience joy, to continue becoming who I am without believing that being happy means I loved less. And this is one of the reasons Louise Hay's work becomes so meaningful to me. Her work kept bringing us back to love, back to ourselves, back to compassion. And for me, self-love eventually became much deeper than saying positive words in the mirror. It became, can I stay with myself when life hurts? Can I be kind to myself when I'm grieving? Can I forgive myself? Can I allow myself to feel without making myself wrong for feeling? Can I love myself through the paths of life I never would have chosen? If you're watching this and you're carrying a loss, I want you to hear me carefully. You do not have to rush. You don't have to prove that you have healed. You don't have to stop loving them. You don't have to follow somebody else's timeline. And you don't have to turn your grief into spiritual lesson today. Perhaps for today, it's enough to say, this mattered to me. I loved deeply. This hurts. And I'm still here. And maybe that's where your healing journey begins. This is exactly why I have created Healing the Heart from Grief to Self-Love on 29th August. It's a 5-hour Louise Hay inspired healing experience where we will gently explore grief, forgiveness, self-love, acceptance, and coming back to ourselves. This isn't a space where I'm going to tell you how you should grieve. It's a space to feel, reflect, journal, explore forgiveness, and begin creating an intention for acceptance and peace. If something I have shared today touched a place inside you, perhaps the space is for you. The link is in the description. And if you know someone who's carrying a loss quietly, send them this video. They don't have to be ready to let go. They can simply begin by knowing. They don't have to carry it alone. I'll see you on August 29. Now, why this particular workshop on 29th August? Because 30th August is my dear Louise Hay's day of transition. So we are paying tribute by conducting this workshop for all the people who are grieving or who have stopped grieving for whatever reasons. Namaste. I'll see you inside the workshop.